Up next, Authentically Detroit welcomes the host of Roots and Wonder podcast, Kamaria Gray. Plus, we're diving into what's happening with contaminated dirt in the city of Detroit. And of course, what we're reading from the Michigan Chronicle. Keep it locked. Authentically Detroit starts after these messages. Applications have opened for the Eastside Community Network Summer Discovery Program. Designed for students entering 7th, 8th, and 9th grade in the fall of 26, this summer experience is a full-day, in-person program that combines structured academic learning, hands-on enrichment experiences, and creativity to guide youth in developing life skills related to political and civic engagement, climate change, and environmental justice using art-based expression as a tool for learning and empowerment. The program runs from June 29th to July 31st from 8:30 a.m. to 5 o'clock p.m. Applications close on April 30th. For more details on how to apply, visit ecn-detroit.org/youth. What's up, Detroit? Welcome to another episode of Authentically Detroit, broadcasting live from the Stoudemire. We're here at ECN. I'm Sam Robinson.
And I'm Donna Davidson.
Thank you all so much for listening in and supporting our efforts to build a platform of authentic voices for real people in the city of Detroit. We want you to like, rate, and subscribe to our podcast on all platforms. We're officially switching up the podcast. Today, we're going to start with an interview with the wonderful Kamaria Gray. She's the host and the creator of the Authentically Detroit Podcast Network's latest edition, Roots and Wonder podcast, a storytime space where little ones are invited to slow down, listen closely, and remember. Each episode retells beloved African folktales carried across generations through voice, rhythm, and imagination. With warm personality and heart, Roots and Wonder brings ancient stories into modern homes, offering family tales of wisdom, mischief, courage, and wonder to return again and again. Kamaria, welcome to Authentically Detroit. Yeah. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here and to talk about the podcast.
Yes, we are excited to bring you into the Authentically Detroit Podcast Network. We were talking before we started recording how exciting it is to have a show aimed at young parents and their children. A little different than a lot of what you may have heard in that space before. Talk to me about what your show is going to sound and feel like.
So I wanted Roots and Wonder to kind of sound like a coming home for Black children and children across the diaspora, really. I think, there are a lot of, let's go all the way to the beginning. Okay. Yeah. Let's go all the way back.
Take us back.
So I have a daughter. She is 4 years old. I have taken great joy in reading her bedtime stories. We are a Black family. She is a Black little girl. I think it is very important that the books and the literature that I read to her represent her. So I went and bought a lot of the books I remember reading when I was a child. A lot of those books that are Black, depicting Black life and Black childhood, are not written by Black people. And that, while it isn't inherently bad, I don't think it's a realistic depiction of Black life. And I think that representation of Black life should be written, illustrated, talked about by Black people. Mm-hmm. So I started the podcast to kind of introduce the rest of the world and, my community to these books that were written about Black life by Black authors. But I hit a roadblock when the publishing and copyright company said I could not read those books without paying them their money. So I had to do like a 360 and find stories that I could tell that still hit the mark of being culturally affirming. So I looked to African folklore and things that were not copyrighted or things that were written a little bit before the time frame so that I could read them with no legal issues.
All right. So one story that my mother used to tell me when I was little was the story of Epaminondas. I don't know have you heard that one?
No, I haven't.
It's sort of this story of this little boy who does exactly what he's told. And every time he does exactly what he's told, he messes something up. And so the refrain is Epamanam dis. You ain't got the sense you was born with, right? And so it stayed with me. And it was really interesting because the person who actually documented this African folktale was a white woman. And she sort of took it, and the way that she depicted this boy was sort of, this Jim Crow kind of imagery. And she took a story that had been passed down that my grandmother told my mother, and her grandmother told her, and turned it into something that was really reprehensible. But you can't find the story anywhere. And it's interesting that you talk about this African folklore because we all heard the story of Cinderella.
Yes.
And there's another book, I'm trying to remember which one it was. I used to read my daughters when they were little, or my children when they were little, about these girls in Louisiana, and they lived with their mother, and one of them was greedy and the other one wasn't. And, she was trying to steal something, and there were snakes that started chasing her.
Oh, okay.
And it was this great story, but it was really... It was rooted in Black Louisiana culture.
Yes.
I got that book because a friend of mine at the time, we're talking about the 1990s, owned a children's store that was just for Black children. They had Black toys and dolls and books for us. And I remember I even had a cassette tape that had nursery rhymes sung by Black people.
Yeah.
It was really, really beautiful, but I can't find those things right now as easily for my grandchildren. Where do you get the books that you get for your children, and what stories stand out for you?
So I do a lot of online research. I had to look up some of the books that I found. Right now, I'm working from Jamaican folklore. There's a book called it mostly focuses on Anansi, the spider, and his folklore.
Yes.
So that's the current book that I'm working from. I was inspired by the title is escaping me, but The People Learn to Fly, which has a lot of kind of Black folklore stories, tales of enslaved people. But some of those are published and copyrighted, so I couldn't tell them. But I was really inspired by that book. Tar Beach. Stephen Steptoe is one of my favorite Black authors, and a lot of his books inspired me to want to share these tales because you're right. In looking for books written by Black authors for my daughter, it was difficult. And I even found a list. It escapes me what year it was released. I think it was 2023. But out of all of the Black books that were written that year, which was some odd of like 150,000, only 3,000 were actually written by Black authors. And I think that not only is representation important for us as Black people, I think us like owning the money that comes with that. There is a lot of money in storytelling and publishing in books. And I think that oftentimes our stories are being sold for profit by people who are not us. And I find like a very large problem with that. And it was very difficult to share these stories with my child, having that in the back of my mind. So I was like, all right, well, we're going to change this up. So
one of the challenges is that there's gatekeeping with people deciding what stories get to be told. Can you talk about that a little bit?
I think that, explain what you mean by gatekeeping, like our culture.
Oh, I mean, somebody decides we're going to publish this book. We're going to sell this book. We're going to stock this book. We're going to publicize this book. Okay. And so it's not that there aren't Black people writing books. It is that I look at like music, right? Why is gangster rap so popular? Is it because all rappers want to rap like this, or is this because this is how you get signed, right? Because you have a whole industry of music that's being produced that never makes it to airtime, not because people aren't talented, but because people get to decide this is the kind of story that Black children should hear, or this is the kind of story that Black audiences want to read, or the music. So are you finding independent authors, because I've talked to several people who are at least interested in becoming independent authors of children's books in Detroit, and that might be one way to get around copywriting.
I have found one independent author who was allowed to let me read her book. I did find another author who's from Detroit who I was very, I really wanted to read her book, but her publisher would not let me. So I'm open to, expanding this podcast so that it includes more Black authors with stories that I can legally read.
What is the legal? I mean, they don't want their book promoted? What is the reason?
It's not the author. It's the publishing and the copyright. They want their coins. So they know if this becomes popular, which it, they act like the Black dollar doesn't amount to anything, but it does. Especially if I'm targeting Black people. This is a Black dollar. They want their coin. They don't want it going to me. Yeah.
But the other aspect of that is that children's books are not just words. Mm-hmm. There's pictures.
Yeah.
And it would be impossible for you to replicate this book just by reading it. So it's silly.
It is.
But what about self-published authors? There are several books that some of our community members published a few years ago in partnership with adults working with children in our community to come up with children's books that dealt with safety. It would be interesting to do a call for Black children's authors in Detroit who control publishing rights so that they could bring their books to you without the middleman.
Yeah, I'm not against that. I'm definitely interested in expanding the podcast and including Black authors who, would allow me to read their books. I don't want this to stop where it is. I think I'm happy where we are right now, and I'm enjoying the time that it takes for me to rewrite and retell these stories in my own words.
Oh, wow, yes.
So while I'm not keen to jump on that right now, it is like another avenue that I think the podcast can take. And to circle back to your question about gatekeeping stories, I do feel that I think more recently in 2020 and things like that, with the advocating and the coming together of the community, there was more of a push for Black joy in stories. But I do feel that a lot of times, maybe not so in children's books, but in literature, the Black struggle is the seller, and that is not necessarily what I want to read or what I want to read to my child.
I think it's the Black struggle, and then I think there's a certain way that it's structured, right? Do you remember, did you read Toni Morrison's Beloved?
Yes.
And,
yes.
This story where there's the ghost of the child that the mother killed comes back. And it seems like supernatural elements are expected in books written by Black authors more than books written by predominantly white authors. And I think that's really interesting how superstition and supernatural elements are woven into the way that we get to talk about ourselves.
Yeah. It kind of... I think that is beautiful, and we should, carry our traditions, like, Black people in America and the diaspora of Africa. We should carry those traditions. But I do feel like, it's a lot like magical Black Negro kind of thing. Like, what we can exist outside of the struggle and outside of the magic spiritual, trope that has been so often placed upon us.
Right. So you may, I just wrote a novel, right?
Oh, really?
And
congratulations.
Yes, I did. Thank you. And it does incorporate struggle. It's the history of Detroit, but it seeks to flesh out human beings beyond struggle. Who are these people who built institutions, and also shows people having power. And but there's nothing supernatural, because that just doesn't work for me. The magical stuff, it's fine for other people. It's not my preference.
Right.
And yet I found that there was no appetite at all for what I had written by anybody who gets the agents. There's very few agents who are going to sign a Black author anyway.
Yeah.
And there's just no appetite for it. And so I decided to self-publish and to work through what we're calling Authentically Detroit Press to create a pathway for people who have works that they want to sell or they want to bring before audiences so that we can tell our own stories in our own way. For me, the problem isn't even in struggle. A lot of good stories do have struggle.
Yes, they do.
But it is the way you flatten our experiences and our existence so that we're nothing more than very desolate places. I mean, I don't want to read a whole book where nobody ever has any joy, where nobody laughs, where nobody...
It's the expectation of struggle and the entertainment of our struggle. That's not something, So yeah, a lot of thought and kind of frustration went into the creation of Roots and Wonder. And I've also been a educator for years. I most recently was, you know what? Scratch that. I don't want to talk about my old job. Mm-hmm. I'm starting my own play school scratch that. Let me gather my thoughts real quick. But I most recently got out of childcare work and I'm starting my own business. So I think it's that literature for Black children is very important. Mm-hmm. Literacy for Black children is very important. And the way to increase and promote that is to let them listen to, hear, retell stories that represent them, that they can feel close to.
There's a narrative that younger parents aren't reading to their children as much as perhaps our parents read to us. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's just this also sort of inaccurate racist narrative that Metro Detroiters, that some conservative Republicans will echo about young people's ability to read. What is it that they say? It's not true, but they're saying that 50% of they base it off of like
these illiteracy rumors.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the reality is people don't read as much, but if you don't think Black people read, look at Black Twitter. Okay,
yeah.
We not only read words, we create words. Anybody created more words than Black folks?
Yeah,
like come with something or just reuse a word and now it means something else in our language. But this idea that we're somehow linguistically underdeveloped is, and we formed rap.
It doesn't square with the industry that is the the children's book. I mean, every time I'm somewhere else in an airport, or I was in Dallas, Texas, thinking at my friend's baby shower about children's books or what to get them, and there's a ton of new writing and clearly some illustrators that are living off of these works.
Yeah, I mean, Black literature exists. It is a thriving, even if the dollars, the big bucks aren't being pushed behind it, it is a thriving community. I will say, though, I do want to disagree a little bit because I have worked in DPSCD schools for a while. The kids are struggling with their literacy. Right. You know, there were students, those Black students, who did sue the state of Michigan or the city of Detroit because they were passed through school, basically, without the reading. Yeah,
the mythology that I wanted to speak to.
They'll say like half of Detroiters are illiterate.
Can't read
at all.
Yeah, that
illiteracy is very different than having strong reading skills.
Yeah,
okay.
There's definitely propaganda.
Exactly, and it's never been measured. Mm-hmm. It's never been measured, and also, the reading tests in schools don't necessarily measure the ability to read words. Mm-hmm. They measure interpretation of those words. And those reading tests have not been scientifically validated. And so there's this question of what percentage of people cannot read street signs, what percentage of people cannot read job applications, cannot read Twitter. Because I'm telling you, we're on Twitter. And that's different. Then, so I think that there's degrees and there's ways that things are framed. American people don't read. Let's start with that. Books aren't selling like they used to. People watch TV. Kids have tablets. And so the way we consume even reading information is very different than it was when my kids were little. My kids did not have iPads. And my granddaughter, who is now 8, asked one of my daughters, she says, were you poor when you were little? How did you not have iPads? Were you poor? And it's like, you know what? We didn't have computers either, right? And somehow we survived. And so I think we live in a world that is not as literate as it used to. We live in a nation that is not terribly literate when you look at the rest of the world because we don't read a lot. But the suggestion that most or half of all Black people can't read, period, is an exaggeration and something that is used to perpetuate stereotypes that are unfair.
I would like to hear what you do experience in DPSCD, as I would imagine your statement isn't a controversial one with parents and teachers.
Yeah, I do agree, that there's a lot going on with the literacy levels of all adults around America, but and I think that that's an inflated statement to say that 50% of Black people, cannot read. But in my experience in the Detroit public schools is the kids are struggling with reading, like simple words to read, write, and spell. Mm-hmm. I was experiencing teenagers who couldn't spell the word firefighter or read it, and this was a daily occurrence. Like the school need to do better. There is not enough resources. There's not enough care. The schools need to do better. The education system in Detroit needs to do better. The whole government of Michigan needs to do better in terms of education, but also adults need to care more. It is easy to put a screen on, put a story on. I would like for my podcast to kind of dive more into literacy and comprehension.
When you say adults, you mean parents.
Yes,
Yeah.
parents,
Yeah.
yes.
You were couching the language a little bit, but
Sorry,
these
yes.
parents need to...
Yeah, parents, I think we have all been privy to the conversation right now happening in the city of Detroit about the teens taking over and what needs to be done.
Yeah.
And there have been many opinions, especially from like some of the more prominent Detroit influencers, talking about locking parents up and, the parents ain't SHIT. And like, while I will never agree with incarceration, I do think that parents are not doing enough. It is quite visible when I'm going to the park with my child. I'm a stay-at-home mom right now. I've got all the time in the world. So when I'm at the park with my child, I'm the only adult on the park.
Yeah.
The other adults are in their cars. These
Yeah.
children are small. They shouldn't be unsupervised. So if this is happening in a public setting where it's just like, you got it, what's going on at home?
It's interesting.
What is home? We have a tremendous amount of homelessness. We have a tremendous number of people who are doubled up. We have mass incarceration. We have so many things that are traumatic happening in our communities, and we don't have resources. When back in the day, how many kids were going to the Boys and Girls Club when they weren't at home?
Yeah.
This idea that the most resource deprived people should be able to provide everything for their kids. What if you're working during the day? Because you have very few people who are actually on welfare anymore and working one job doesn't really help. I think we really have to think, how are our communities structured?
I do agree with that.
There was a time when a child didn't have a parent at home, there were other people in the community who would watch that child.
Right.
Right now, we don't have that. And so I think we're looking at the sort of dismantling of social support systems inside of our communities, and we're mad at the children and we're mad at the parents, but we're not really dealing with the struggle that so many people are dealing with. And so I deal with parents and adults, and I can say that a lot of people are in absolute crisis.
Right.
Yeah.
The other thing I'll say, and I wanted to say this real quickly, we have lived in families where you had seniors helping to take care of kids, what do you call those, multi-generational families? How many of those families lost elders to COVID?
Right.
And so there's all of these systems, and it feels to me as though the behavior is brokenness, and the solution has got to be healing and not punishment or condemnation of people who are really, really broken at this point, including the teenagers and the parents who were broken teenagers. Now they have kids.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I have opinions and thoughts that, I don't usually share my opinions and thoughts on this, but I want to hear yours first on the teen takeovers, why they're happening, how you could prevent, quote, air quote, them.
Yeah.
What are they even? What is this teen takeovers?
I think, it's another inflated statement that's being made to, I don't want to go all like, be all anti-government or whatever, but I think it's another inflated statement that's being made. And, I'm obviously aware of the systemic issues, the racism, and the lack of resources in the city of Detroit, working in the school system, volunteering, living in Detroit, growing up in Detroit. I understand that the system is broken and that people are in pain and they are not thriving right now. But I don't think that being poor is any reason not to read.
I'm not talking about poverty. So I just want to be clear.
Okay. Right. Lack of resources or struggling is any reason not to read. My parents, I didn't grow up with everything, but my dad was a really good storyteller. And I very vividly remember his voices, his characters, and him telling me and my sisters a story, regardless of what was going on. And my dad took us to the library every single week.
So you grew up with a father. So let's start there.
Okay, I don't want to argue about how people are growing up.
But I think that I want to avoid saying that poverty is the issue.
Right. Okay.
I want to avoid saying that. People grew up poor. My mother was poor. My grandmother was poor. they read.
I just think accountability is an important statement. I'm not ignoring what's going on.
Who's accountable for what, right? I think we can say hold people accountable, but I think a lot of times people themselves are broken. If you are a 14-year-old mother who was raised by a 14-year-old and raised by a 14-year-old and raised by a 14-year-old, accountability sounds good, but it doesn't really fix things because we already have mass incarceration. Will we lock them all up? We already have more children in foster care than any other people in the United States. We have so many children placed out of home and taken from their parents' homes, and none of these punishments work. And so when we say accountability, that means somehow to me punishment.
But that's not what I meant.
Okay, so how do you hold people accountable if you don't punish them?
I think regardless of what's going on in your life, you can read.
Okay, but
I think that you can tell a story and you can find joy. I understand that there are struggles, but I think going through something, you still have choices.
But so what does accountability look like then? How do we hold parents accountable for failing to raise children the right way? If we don't take them out of the home or imprison them or fine them or do something else that punishes them, how do you hold them accountable?
You incentivize?
I just want people to read.
We all want people to read. Mm-hmm. I think that's not ever going to be the issue. What I found in working over the years is that love goes a long way to helping people who are hurting. Resources and support goes a long way to helping people. And that's different than...
I agree. And that's why I lovingly created this podcast, to support people reading.
Exactly.
I can't fix all of the problems in the world or the Black community, but I can retell our stories so that they are close to home, so that anyone can listen to them regardless of where they are.
And I think that's the only thing I'm saying is the village has to come together. We are the descendants of people who were enslaved, people who have been harmed in many, many ways. And some of our parents and some of our grandparents found a way out of no way. But that does not exist. That does not sit the norm. You have so many issues around broken homes and so many reasons for broken homes. If we're going to fix them, then we've got to be in the place of healing because we have been punished for centuries. When we see a kid out of control, we say, oh, that kid needs some home training. Black kids get beat. That's not the issue. My kids that I've worked with over the years, and I'm a child advocate because we work with teens right now, and I've seen them change. I worked with a young man who graduated from high school who could not read, who now has his master's degree. One of my young people who came to my program was on a tether, and his daughter just graduated from high school, and he works for a youth program. And it was the love that was invested in him that changed their situations. Because the parents, I talked to the mom, and everything that happened to this son had happened to her. And she didn't know how to break that cycle. So I think if we come together as a community and you tell your stories and you read, you're going to give hope and help pave the way for somebody to say, hey, wait a minute, I like those stories. Let me try the same thing. Mm-hmm. And some child to become interested in the stories and be more interested in reading.
There was a headline that I saw, Youth in Crisis. It made me think, has the youth ever not been in crisis? Has there ever been, this conversation is one that has played out over the last 60, 80, 120 years.
Have Detroit youth ever been better than they are right now? I mean, listen, when my kids were in high school, got to eat, got to live. You had people killed for cardi glasses, killed for the gym shoes they were going to wear, killed because they were at a party and people were shooting it up. When I first moved to Drexel Avenue, around the block at Remus Robinson Middle School, there were more school shootings in Remus Robinson than any school in the city of Detroit. And I'm talking about 1991. So this is 2026. And we say, how did things get so bad? When has Detroit not been the murder capital or had high rates of murder and children behaving? Maybe there was this other time when the kids are well behaved. The crises have been there, and so have the consequences, but I think these are symptoms as opposed to the problems. And again, some parents, like your father, like my grandmother, do a great job of
like my mother,
people out of really broken places. But let's find ways to move forward where we're part of the solution And right now in this room over here, when you leave, you see those teens over there, some of them who are in college right now have come from all kinds of situations where their parents couldn't be there for them. And so we are. And sometimes that means you also have to help the parent too. And you are, because you're also going to start this children's day.
It's a daycare. Or like a play school. It's like a forest school. I'm doing it in home. And yeah, I recognize that being outdoors is something that's often afforded to groups that don't look like me. I just had an experience with an outdoor play school that I thought was wonderful. So I wanted to replicate that, but kind of center Black children and Black people. So it's like a Reggio-inspired kind of pre-K. It is in the works. We live on the east side of Detroit where I grew up, so very, very close to here. And we have about 2 acres. We've got ducks and a big old farm dog and garden beds and fruit trees. So I'm going to be turning a portion of the yard into like a forest play school for
that's awesome.
Detroit youth.
That sounds something that our own Ian Solomon would be interested in learning more about.
Yeah,
I love Ian.
Outside.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is really cool.
He's great.
Being outside yesterday at Belle Isle, I'm just like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, and that's a big part of it is exposure.
Yeah.
A big part of it is you've been exposed. You can expose other people. We can each pass it on because so many people haven't been exposed. We used to take young people to a camp and they'd never been outside before.
Yeah.
They'd never really enjoyed that before. And again, many of their parents hadn't either. And so what I see is I've been doing this work, working with teenagers since about the year 2000. And so many of the people I was working with are now in their 40s. It's embarrassing, but they're now in their 40s. And I can see over time how they've been able to change that trajectory for their family because somebody reached out to them. When you work with those families, some of them, you're going to change the way they work with their kids because they now know something different.
Yeah.
I can play outside.
Goal,
I can read to my kids. Even educating parents about the importance of reading to their kids and making it fun.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of stigma still in the Black community. I did a garden program at Denby, and a lot of the kind of comments were like, I don't want to be out in the sun. It was a lot of, I don't want to do the slave work, and a lot of, I don't want to get Blacker. And I think that it's kind of sad that we still have so much internalized racism in our community, and so much like we should be connected to the land more than anyone else. So I think it's really important to kind of like get the children when they're little and like enforce that. Like, this is not scary. This is not slave work. This is a part of who you are.
But a lot of people came here escaping slavery or escaping Jim Crow, right? In fact, I write that about in my book. You're escaping what you consider to be oppression. And I'm never going to be outside again because I've escaped that. And you don't tell your children anything about that. And we do have to heal from those historical things. And a lot of parents don't pass that on. When I was working at Brightmoor, there were some organizations working with kids, and a lot of the Black parents said, no, this looks like modern day slavery. You have my kids outside. We have to workshop what that means.
Yes, right.
And workshop that there's really trauma attached to what that means.
Yeah.
And if we work it through and we talk about it and we heal from that, then we can release it, and then we can go on to then reclaim the earth, because the earth is ours.
Yes.
And this is how you get justice. You can't have justice without the earth.
Yes.
Food justice is not going to a food bank. It's growing your own food.
Yeah.
Right. And so I'm in agreement, but I always want to change it from everything to really looking at the system, or the major insult is the brokenness that comes from the trauma. And the major solution is the healing from that brokenness from people who can see the light.
Yeah, we're going to take a break, but before we do, I want to do something that I rarely do, which is offer my unfiltered opinion. The teen takeovers, I don't think there is a stop or a solution or anything. The stop is to stop giving it attention. The kids want attention, and that's like at the heart of this. What is it? Is it's individual young kids wanting to be like the 25, 26, 27 20-year-old in their community that is a cool party promoter or whatever, or what have you. Like the kids just want to be out. They want to be outside like they see their bigger, older.
They should be outside.
And that's what they should.
But
right.
there needs to be spaces for them. And like they want attention, we should give them attention. Like I think my original point was when I said adults aren't caring enough and doing enough. And, you know, I did mean parents, but I also meant adults. We have to, as adults, even though I'm a mom, I will inconvenience myself for another child. Yes. I think we all need to get better at inconveniencing ourselves for children. Yeah. They do want to be outside. They do want attention. Yeah. Let's give it to them, but not with handcuffs, you know? Yeah. Like, exactly. These kids need mentors. They need somebody there.
Yes. They want to be, just like how all of us do, they want to be famous on the internet. And that's a part of it, too.
I wanted to be outside when I was a kid.
So let's make them famous. Right, but like for, I don't know, cleaning up a park or something.
Right. When I was a kid, I could go to somebody's backyard and party, or go in somebody's basement and party. We had places to go. Mm-hmm. We had venues to go to party. When I was a kid, I belonged to the Plymouth Church Youth Group, and the man who is now the pastor of Plymouth Church Plymouth Church, was our youth group leader. His wife, who is now the former chief judge for the federal courts in Detroit, was our youth group leader. And they let us have parties in the church basement. We had the best parties in the city of Detroit. Hands down, people would line up to come to our parties inside of a church. We let people, they gave us a space and they gave us love and they listened to us. They took us on I'm talking about 1979. I'm not talking about any time recent. Where do kids go to safely hang out today?
Yeah.
If we can't come up with spaces for kids to safely hang out, there's nothing wrong with wanting to party. There are a whole lot of 40-year-olds who want to party too, but there are spaces for them.
They're going to go to the Cosm right there in the Monroe.
Well, we've gotten
Cosm, Detroit. They're going to go there. Well, are they? That was my sarcastic joke. Well, but I mean, that was my point. They had a space right there, and they got taken away.
It got taken away, and it got commodified. We used to hang out at Belle Isle, right? Mm-hmm. And in the Strip. You can't even be out in a Belle Isle past 10 p.m. right now. You can't be on the Riverwalk past 10 p.m. Outdoors has been made illegal. And then when they push back, we call it a teen takeover. Now, do some of them like the attention? Yeah. But all kids want attention. That's part of being a child. And let's find ways, and I agree with you about the mentors, about finding ways to give them attention. And I also agree that it's collective accountability, not family accountability, but that collective accountability of our community to show love to kids. Because if the parent can't or won't do it, we can. Mm-hmm. And let's just do it. Let's just give them love. But not pathologize our teenagers, not talk about them as though somehow there's something horribly wrong with them.
Yeah. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about some headlines, money out of politics, some important legislative races happening locally. We'll be right back.
Interested in renting space for corporate events, meetings, conferences, social events, or resource fairs? The Stoudemire Wellness Hub and Mass Detroit Small Business Hub are available for rental by members, residents, businesses, and organizations. We offer rentals for activities such as corporate events, social events, meetings, conferences, art classes, fitness classes, and more. To learn more about our rentals and reserve space, visit ecn-detroit.org/space rental.
Welcome back, everyone. We're going to run down some of this week's top headlines in the city of Detroit here on Authentically Detroit. We're going to talk about money out of politics, Donna. I know you're excited because Money Out of Politics turned in their petition signatures. They got, I think, over 100,000 over the required threshold. I talked to Sean McBreartree, one of the executive directors, or excuse me, I believe he's one of the co-chairs of the committee, of the ballot committee. Money Out of Politics, what would it do? It would ban DTE, consumers, Blue Cross Blue Shield, General Motors, Ford from spending dollars on political committees, candidates, causes. It does have some bipartisan support, though mostly the coalition is made up of progressive groups. The corporate donors are a little worried about this. They're going to be spending a lot of money, I'm told, to oppose this. Sean told me that he believes that this will end up on the ballot in November. It's going to be on a ballot with some ballot proposals like, do you want to require that all voters show their ID? I think there's going to be another one, but this one's going to be.
That's not actually the yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, that is one of the proposals that will likely be on the ballot. Donna, talk about why you're excited that Money Out of Politics turned their signatures in.
Let me clarify the ID thing first.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because it's not just enough to show your driver's license. You have to show your driver's license and an original copy of your birth certificate. And if you're married,
under this proposal,
and if you're married and your name changed, you have to bring your marriage certificate and or bring a passport. So this is going to disproportionately disadvantage women who are married. It will also disadvantage people who don't have passports, because if you have a passport, that's an easy solution, and that ends up being class-based. And so what will happen is it's another attack on voting rights. And most people who've observed and looked at it are very concerned, and it was being billed by those people collecting signatures as something that makes it easier to vote or improves the franchise as opposed to something that restricts it. This, again, is the same kind of legislation that is holding up the federal budget at the federal level, because it's the SAVES Act that that Donald Trump wants to pass and our Congress doesn't want to pass.
Yeah, it's a local version of the same act.
It's a local version of the same act. And so it's bad at the federal level and it's bad at the state level. And I bring that up because, I'm on the board of Voters Not Politicians, which is one of the organizations that sponsored this Money Out of Politics. It was actually, I believe, the fiduciary for this effort. Initially, it was all volunteers trying to get the signatures, and we were up against paid people who were collecting signatures for the voting reforms or changes to voting rights.
Americans for Citizens Only.
Okay, Americans for Citizens Only. So we were up against that, and we had to withdraw and start again because you're given a time limit by which you can collect enough signatures, and it's over. We collected over 500,000 signatures. I think we needed something like 360,000. I'm not sure the exact numbers. I was trying to look them up quickly, but we are over, as you point out, over 100,000. What this will do is it restricts people in regulated monopolies like DTE, Consumers Energy, from being able to spend money to pay legislators who then or fund campaigns, because what is the percentage of legislators who are actually receiving money from either DTE or Consumers Energy is really high. It's like over 70% of those legislators. And then every year they vote to increase the energy bills, and they are not regulating them in the same way that other states are. And so this will change that. And I know that what's going to happen is corporations are going to file a lawsuit and say this is a free speech issue. I want to point out that as somebody who has run nonprofit organizations for about 30 years, we can't give money as a nonprofit to a campaign. So why is corporate speech more protected than nonprofit speech?
Well, the corporations would say, yeah, you can through a PAC, and that's the same way they're doing it.
No, you cannot, as a nonprofit, you cannot give money to a PAC, and you cannot give money to a campaign.
I said through a PAC, through a separate entity PAC.
But the nonprofit itself cannot contribute.
And that's one of what they push back on. They say, well, how should the labor be able to do it through a separate entity PAC, and we're not able to do it through a separate entity PAC.
But the issue is that's
the conversation.
The conversation is that labor is not regulated by the state. Labor does not have to go to the state to approve wage increases and things like that. DTE has to go to the state Michigan Public Service Commission to ask for a rate increase. They have to present their energy plan to the Michigan Public Service Commission. The Michigan Public Service Commission is appointed by legislators. The state of Michigan legislators have the ability to pass laws for things like community solar. and they don't. Community solar being solar that is established in communities and shared among people so that people who are low income can all benefit from a shared solar system. That's not legal in Michigan. What is legal is an individual can put solar on their house. And so once again, those are usually wealthier individuals who can afford to put solar on their house. Those of us who are pushing for that find that we can't move forward because legislators have been bought and paid for. Another example of the concern people have is we have a very outdated grid in places like Detroit. Our grid is so outdated that if everybody in our community decided they wanted solar, our grid would be overwhelmed. We can't even sustain it. The reason we have power outages so often is because, first of all, we have power lines going over our community. Now, when you build a new community and there's new development, that's when they reinvest in the grid. And so you're seeing that kind of disproportionality on what some people call energy apartheid is taking place. And the other issue is that Michigan burns more coal than most power systems, even Indiana and Ohio. We're still burning coal. We are not moving to renewable energies. And that coal burning, those coal burning plants are producing pollution that impacts the health of people in fence-line communities. And so there are some very real and specific ways that people in places like money or to support money out of politics are saying, let's look at the rate increases. We have less reliable energy in Michigan than most people in the nation, and it also costs more than most people in the nation. And the reason that you have those two things together, less reliability and higher cost, is because of a lack of effective regulation. And so, yes, what they're saying is we don't want, either you can be a monopoly and we can stop allowing you to be a corporate monopoly, because monopolies in U.S. government are not really allowed except in the instances of
public
utilities. There used to be a time when phones were a monopoly, and now they've been, broken up. But now you have the public utilities being a monopoly, and it's got to change if you're going to see anything close to energy fairness and voters and politicians being able to influence what happens with the people who are supposed to be supplying our heat and electricity.
The Money Out of Politics initiative would also expand campaign finance laws to disclose donors on advertisements for candidates and ballot questions, even if they do not expressly advocate voting for or against them. In Detroit and in Michigan, you have a lot of those type of in-kind advertisements or political messages from candidates that don't have enough money to say, vote for me for mayor. An example of, or for any office. For an example of this was last year, you guys remember the 13th Congressional District paid for Solomon Kinloch's mayoral ad that appeared on television. Unlike Mary Sheffield's ads that said, vote for me for mayor, Kinloch's TV ad was just I'm Solomon Kinloch. These are my values and what I stand for. It's a little bit more expensive to pay for the actual ad that tells people to. And so this...
And also the attack ads get paid for.
Yes, that is a huge Elon Musk and others.
Who say they are not attacking the campaigns. And these are federal issues.
So
I think it goes a long way towards ensuring that corporations cannot buy politicians. And politicians are actually accountable to the people who elect them.
One of the best questions that I posed that sort of revealed the values and the political identities and ideologies of local candidates this cycle has really been, did you sign the Money Out of Politics initiative? If they did, I know what type of Democratic politician they are. If they didn't, I know what type of Democratic politician they are. Some of those candidates I recently highlighted in a story that was published today on Michigan Chronicle. Headline is "These Detroit area primary races will test Democratic voters." I want you guys who are all in on the idea that the U.S. Senate primary is a proxy for the 2028 Democratic presidential primary to know that there are also local legislative races that are also sort of proxies. You have Senate District 1, 2, 3, 10. You have House District 8 and 11. Let's go backward. House District 11, Kimberly Fisher. She's backed by Donovan McKinney in the Michigan Working Families Party, faces Macomb County Commissioner Michael Howard. In House District 8, incumbent state Democrat Helena Scott. She is more moderate is being challenged by Democratic Socialists of America-backed Chris Gilmer Hill. Deanna Austin is also running in that race. Amanda Treppa is running against State Representative Natalie Price. Treppa is the newcomer. She's backed by the Working Families Party, and Horace Sheffield, who is her pastor, has also endorsed her campaign. That is one that's more interesting. It's not as like moderate progressive as some of the other races. Price is endorsed by many of her legislative colleagues, the League of Conservation Voters. And then you got Senate District 3. Oh my gosh, we've been seeing some of Adam Olier's billboards up on Harper Avenue, actually. He faces Ebony Taylor, Corey Hall, John Conyers III, LaTanya Garrett, Tonu Reeves, Kimberly Knott, and there's a few other candidates. That is probably one of the best to watch if you're a progressive or a moderate ideologue, sort of rooting for candidates locally. Definitely watch out. I think Corey Hall has a lot of Adam Olier's former endorsers. Olier is going to have all the money. He's putting his name and face on billboards already. Ebony Taylor, who is endorsed by Stephanie Chang, who currently holds that seat, last week was endorsed by Senator Bernie Sanders. In State Senate District 2, Abbas Alaway, he is the leader of the February 2024 Uncommitted Movement. He faces State Rep Erin Burns. She represents Dearborn currently. That seat is currently represented by Sylvia Santana. Detroit is losing some longtime state senators.
Well, that's the term limits. That's
yes.
the issue around term limits is that we lose expertise.
Yes. And then perhaps the most the funniest race of them all, Abe Ayash and Justin Onwenu. This has become a personality test among Detroit Democratic voters. Onwenu is an appointee of former Mayor Mike Duggan and current Mayor Mary Sheffield. Ayash is backed by the Detroit Progressive Establishment, Working Families Party. Onwenu is a labor organizer, and he comes from environmental justice background. He is endorsed by the League of Conservation Voters. He's backed by Wayne County Executive Warren Evans. He's backed by Detroit Councilmember Scott Benson, but he's also backed by U.S. Rep. Andy Levin. He is sort of saying that he's going to unite the progressive and moderate wings of the party, while Abe Ayash is, if he were to be elected, he would continue his firebrand that kind of ticked off Joe Tate and other, more moderate Detroit Democrats. But definitely take a look at that story. This sort of proxy test of progressive versus moderate
right.
is what we're watching heading into this primary.
And sometimes the words progressive and moderate, muddy the water because they don't really explain what people are actually standing for. Yeah. And I think it's important that we look at some of those issues around water. What does water cost? And do we have water affordability in our community? Issues around things like environmental justice, and are we regulating the environment? Are we regulating DTE? I just wanted to point out something I forgot to mention before. Mm-hmm. In 2023, November or October of 2023, DTE paid out $750 million to its shareholders. That's in 2023. That March following in 2024, DTE said it needed about $432 million worth of rate increases to update its grid. Now, simple math would say if you paid out $750 in 2023, why would you then need $430 in 2024? Do the math. And they said, well, our shareholders really make these demands on us, and we've got to make our shareholders happy, or they can, change things around. And so when you have shareholders, not even the executives who work for DTE, but shareholders who don't have any skin in the game other than making money, being able to determine they want our gas prices, they want our electrical fees to go up so they can make more money off of us, then we have a problem, and that is the basis for the regulation. It is not to be mean. It is not to restrict voices. It is really to say shareholders should not be able to determine price. Shareholders should not be able to cheapen the product. Shareholders should not have that product, especially when they are given a monopoly, because there's no competition. There's no way to opt out of DTE. Every year, DTE sends this survey saying, how do you feel about our services? Would you recommend it to somebody else? And I usually laugh because the only option is to leave.
Well, you can move to Wyandotte, I guess.
What in Wyandotte? Who?
They have their own public utility. There is an environmental justice issue locally that I have not heard any candidates talk about. I wonder if that could be because they are all scared of the former candidate, the guy that was just running for governor as an independent, Mike Duggan. Donna, we're going to be spending some more time talking about Detroit's toxic dirt scandal, issue, whatever you want to call it. It's funny. Charlie LaDuff, who was irrelevant, maybe 3 years ago after he got fired from the Detroit News, and then he has to go on Michigan Enjoyer to continue his journalism career. He did a hell of a scoop here, discovering that Brian McKinney's Guyanga construction, which is no longer in existence, stole dirt from the Northland Mall and was infilling it in demo sites across the city of Detroit. Where is this toxic dirt? Does the city have a map where residents can see where the toxic dirt is if it's near their house? It's so toxic, people say, that you could touch it and get poisoned. Let's talk about it, Donna.
Charlie LaDuff is a sensationalist. And so what he does is he harps on the black man, Brian McKinney, who poisoned about 50 lots, but that they've been able to track. But he doesn't even mention anything about David Holman, who actually in 2024 was required to pay out $4.7 million for poisoning about 200 lots. The reality is we have about 600 polluted, toxic lots in the city of Detroit, and Brian McKinney is not responsible for all of them. What is responsible is a failure to regulate landfill that is used to fill in those lots. If you don't regulate, it's actually cheaper to use contaminated dirt than it is to find enough uncontaminated soil that's tested and then used to fill in those lots. But that's one of the consequences of mass demolition. How about this? You have demolition contractors who are now required to remove the fill or remove the demolition, what gets left, the rubble from demolition. They're required by law to remove it. These contractors take these piles of rubble, they move them into some place away from the city, they crush that rubble down to, become soil, and then they sell it and get paid for bringing that landfill back to the city and filling in holes. You have a whole landfill economy. You have a whole demolition economy many of us don't know about. Now, I would be, you will never hear me defending Brian McKinney on purpose because what he did was wrong. But what he did was done in the context of a system that allowed it. And he became the poster child for the city of Detroit.
He did. Mike Duggan said we need more black contracting. We need more black demolition companies. And what did Brian McKinney do? He decided to take Mike up on it and created one.
He
became certainly the face. He was on social media.
He didn't put himself in the state of the city. The mayor did. And he didn't give himself all those contracts. The city did. And I think if you actually followed the money, and I have no way of doing that, what you will find is he was the face of many contractors who had been operating all along, but he became the friendly face because that's how you sell things in Detroit. You put a black face on destructive processes and people back down. Because I don't know if you recall, there was so much resistance to the demolition to proposal in, and then you got this black man to become the face of it. But I think it's important to look through the systems and institutions that cause the problems that we have right now. If landfill had been required to be tested all along, we wouldn't have this. There were other contractors who were taking soil from cemeteries when they dug up graves, and they found arsenic in some of those landfills, but at no point, despite finding after finding after finding that some of this landfill was toxic, the city stopped and say, okay, from now on, we're going to require testing. Instead, they relied on the contractor's word, and a lot of them are falsifying the source of landfill. About 40% of the landfill, they don't even describe where they got it. And that is an institutional failure on part of the person who set up mass demolitions in the city of Detroit. And his name is Mike Duggan. And so the thing about toxic dirt is it's not just touching the dirt, because touching it is a problem. If you have certain contaminants in dirt and you touch it, that's a problem. So you've got children and you say, kids, don't play on this toxic dirt, because if you touch it, you might get sick. The challenge with a lot of this soil is that it can enter your home because it becomes vaporized. And when it becomes vaporized and enters your home as a vapor intrusion, you can't tell your children don't breathe the air because it's toxic. As kids are outside, what we don't know is a lot of times lead becomes aerosolized. So even if you don't touch it, you breathe it.
No.
And so if you have aerosolized lead and volatile organic compounds vaporizing inside the home, you have impacts on health that go far beyond mere touching it. And those impacts sometimes don't show up for 10 or 15 or 20 years. What we do know is, based on the census tracts people live in, you see dramatic differences in life expectancy. The old way of looking at it was those people are probably just drinking too much and smoking too much and blah, blah, blah. And some of that is true, although they smoke and drink in other places too. And a big part of it, though, is that housing, the safety of indoor air, the indoor air quality pollutants can be so bad that they shorten people's lifespans. And when do they shorten them? When it gets really hot outside and, the toxins become more concentrated in the air, that's when it becomes problematic. So I think the issue of poisoning the dirt in some percentage of 27,000 demolitions in the city of Detroit, if 1/4 of those was contaminated, that's an issue. So when you talk about Snyder and Flint water, you got to talk about Duggan and Detroit dirt.
The number of suspected sites at one point 400 is now at 650. Louis Aguilar reported a couple weeks ago. The city is...
But how does a site become suspected?
That's a good question. The city is about to spend $3.5 million, if approved, to test those sites. You need to test those sites to learn whether or not they're toxic and how toxic they are. We're going to learn more about this. Obviously, the FBI has gotten involved in an investigation.
But
people,
yeah,
I was going to mention that Violet Ikonomova was one of the only reporters that sort of questioned whether or not the headlines over this toxic dirt scandal played into Duggan's independent campaign for governor falling flat. That I'm not sure, but it is interesting as we go forward in terms of what Duggan is going to do after his 12 years as the mayor of Detroit.
Oh, sometimes titans fall. There was a time when Snyder was the most popular person in Michigan. There was a time when Kwame Kilpatrick seemed infallible, but sometimes titans fall. Sometimes hubris allows people to believe they can get away with something over and over again. And because the demolitions in Detroit have been investigated by SIGTARP, by the Inspector General, by the state of Michigan repeatedly. And there have been multiple findings of people going to prison because of violations in what was happening there. This is not something where we thought it was going really, really, really well, and then it fell apart. In 2020, it was 2020, I think, when Proposal M was adopted. There was so much resistance by city council members because of all of these flaws, and by the community because of all of these flaws in the demolition process, that the city said, we're going to create a demolition department, and the demolition department is going to control this. What we do know is that the person he appointed head of that demolition department has stepped down when all of these things came to light. Nobody wants to be left standing to catch this. But, I don't think we even understand the full scope of it. What I will also say, though, is that Kat Stafford, her last article before she left to go to AP, before she went to Reuters, her last article in Detroit, she talked about the fact that the city had agreed to not demolish homes in areas that were impacted by high levels of lead poisoning in children. And they violated their own agreement. We know that there have been those frequent violations. We know also that the cost of demolitions went from about $12,000 per demolition to about $20,000 plus under Mike Duggan. That's a tremendous increase. And people asked initially, why the increase? And do you know what he said? You can look this up. He said it's because we are remediating environmental problems. So we paid all this money
to do the opposite of what was
and now guess what's on the taxpayers? What's on Mary Sheffield? Right. And she will be blamed for this.
She certainly will.
The news media loves to blame the black woman. But what's going to happen now is the city is going to spend, after spending about $900 million on a demolition program that poisoned people's homes in the name of progress. We're going to spend, if you're spending $3.5 million to test, guess how much it's going to cost to remediate? And they're finding 600 homes, suspected homes. You're not even testing homes, so this is suspected. How do they get suspicious? That's the crazy thing about it, is we don't even understand the formula for getting suspicious.
We do not. We're going to try to learn more as our episodes continue.
We're going to follow the story.
Yeah, I honestly have been surprised that no local candidates are talking about this. We're going to take a break, though, and when we come back, we're going to close out with our weekly shout-outs. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Authentically Detroit. Kamaria, you have been waiting very patiently to give us your weekly shout-outs. Let's start with you. Who are you thankful for this week?
I have many, if that's okay.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm giving my Oscar speech right now.
Yeah.
I just want to thank Authentically Detroit first and foremost for believing in my podcast. Huge shout out to Griffin, because I have no idea how to do any of like the tech work. Mm-hmm. So being allowed to be creative is really a wonder.
Takes a lot of time.
Yeah. So shout out to you. And then shout out to my black mama and my black dada, who were really advocates for me reading and loving to read all my life. Shout out to all the people who have listened to Roots and Wonders so far, all the parents who have supported me that I know from far and wide, and the parents that I don't. And shout out to the people who have left a review. So I think those are my shout outs. Oh, and my daughter, who has obviously inspired this entire journey.
Shout out to my grandchildren. I had so much fun hanging out with my 8-year-old granddaughter, Luna, this past weekend. She is so funny, and so she was just cracking us up and so sweet. And, you know, I've been dealing with some problems with my knees, and I was carrying something. She says, no, let me carry that, Gigi, because your body hurts. And she's like, you old woman, your body hurts. But it was so sweet and thoughtful. She won't let me do anything around her because she's worried about me hurting. Mm-hmm. And it's just amazing to have a little person be such a kind and loving person. And she was on the honor roll and got the Citizenship Award last week. I love my little Maverick, and and when I have my children together, they bring me so much joy and hope, even in the worst of times. They are the light that shines in my world.
Well, I want to give a shout out to someone who has just been absolutely, he's been a force of nature. Is unlikely. What did Rihanna say? We found love in a hopeless place. You know, I was in Orlando, Florida when I was like, I don't even know, a young child, and there was a family, and they were walking through with their. I was in my, I think, Ben Wallace Pistons jersey, and there was a family in Spurs jerseys, and that was the summer that in June. In, I think, 2005, the Pistons actually were defeated by the San Antonio Spurs in the finals. And from that day forward, of seeing that full family of Spurs, and they even had the finals patches on their jerseys, so you knew they were wealthy, and they had all just bought new Spurs jerseys after they just won the championship over my Pistons. And so I vowed for the rest of my life to hate the San Antonio Spurs until, there was Michael Jordan, there was LeBron James, and now, ladies and gentlemen, there is Victor Wembanyama. And Victor Wembanyama may be the greatest basketball player we come to know. He certainly socially seems to have a brain, perhaps above the level of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar even. It has been really exciting to watch this young player, really more so off the court. I mean, the guy on the court is literally 7'6" tall. He looks unreal. Like, he literally looks unreal. But off the court, he has a brain. He's French. And so, you know, he doesn't come with American media consumption brain. He comes with his own sort of, perspective. And it's quite fascinating. He defeated this past weekend the worst team in the NBA, really, foul baiting. I just hate, we in Detroit we watch what they call an ethical style of basketball, where the players are not trying to bait the referees into calling fouls. And so this long-winded shout out to Victor Wembanyama. I needed to get it off somewhere. Thank you, Victor, for, if not for the Pistons, he should have been a Piston, by the way.
He doesn't flop, right?
No, he doesn't.
Nothing makes me angrier than floppers.
So the Thunder were chanting flopper at him, actually. So some people would say he does, but I think, he has to sell the club. He has said sometimes he has to fall to the ground because his body is so big that if he were to not fall in a specific way that, but no, he defeated the flop team. The OKC Thunder are literally like...
Are they worse than Cleveland?
Oh my God, it's worse than anything. Cleveland's not even, that's just James Harden. The whole team on the Thunder are trained to flop.
I felt like everybody on the Cleveland flop, but I hear you.
Man, yeah, it was
They were
bad.
bad.
It was just bad to watch.
I'm sorry I didn't watch that.
You got to watch. This is going to be the best NBA Finals ever. I think all basketball fans, the New York Knicks and the San Antonio Spurs, is a rematch of the 1999 Finals. Pretty soon we're going to have a rematch of the 2005 Finals. Should have happened perhaps last year on the 20th anniversary, but nevertheless, we want to thank you guys so much for listening to Authentically Detroit. Next week, we will be back, probably with less basketball. Thank you so much, guys.